Hey guys, I quickly want to talk about here and somewhat explain a certain question always being asked or thrown around, especially between buddies in the garage, at the track, or at hangouts, whatever may have you, is that people tend to ask, compare, or even compete with saying, what boost or how much boost are you running? Now, listen, it's perfectly fine to ask for the sake of actually asking and knowing for whatever interested reason it's being asked for. But for many out there that don't know or really get how Boost PSI really works and how every different forced induction engine and setups are different to one another as far as the final performance output, supercharged or turbocharged, a little 1 litre motor to a 6.4 plus litre motor, whatever it is, I'll explain a little on how PSI should be looked at without getting too technical about it. By no means, this isn't a take about boost coming from either a turbo or a blower, or how they work either. We'll leave that for another time. Okay. PSI, pounds per square inch, or the measuring of pressure. Pounds meaning as in weight or force, and square inch is the measure of area. Basically, the increasing moving mass or force in any given area. Pressure is also there and increasing. Given now the same area is increased in size or volume, that pressure will now decrease. Okay, so let's get simple with all this. Take a look at this example shown here. You have a big pipe and a small pipe, both fed by, say, a turbo, matched accordingly to its size there for reference. Now, take a look at the pressure gauge tapped in there. Basically a PSI boost gauge. Both are reading 10 PSI at the volume or size that they're each at. But which pipe there do you think has greater volume mass at the same given pressure reading? That's right, the larger bad boy pipe on the top there. Thus meaning it can provide an engine with more available mass volume, meaning more horsepower. You could probably create some PSI on a gauge by, just blowing through a straw. But that doesn't mean there's volume mass there to do anything. So PSI is relevant to what type of setup it's on. Example, a small blower, supercharger, fitted to an engine accordingly. So considering the blower's internal size, volume, efficiency in rotor or blade designs, and obviously overdrive, it'll make, say, X amount of power on a certain PSI that it reads. Now let's replace that same blower with another that's of similar style but simply larger in internal volume, larger rotors or blades. And if you could replicate the same amount of PSI, but now it's at that pressure reading with more volume mass at hand, it's going to make more power. Hence all that extra volume entering them chambers. Basically going back to that pipe picture diagram shown earlier. Same thing. Same goes with turbos, smaller turbo or turbos that has smaller housings, blades and openings, can flow and push through a certain amount on a given engine at a given PSI readout. Replace that turbo with a larger but matched unit, and it'll simply deliver a larger volume mass of compressed air towards that intake at the same given pressure readout, if it were. Also, these examples will require a retune to accommodate all that extra volume of flow now entering, even though the pressure reading is the same as previous. In simple terms, two small block Fords, let's say, similar combo, one with a 671 blower, the other with an 871 blower. Set both up with overdrives to achieve, say, 10 PSI. Guess which one is cramming more air in them ports? You guessed it, the 871. Not forgetting the smaller 671 would also have to be set on a greater overdrive compared to the 871, thus working harder also. So PSI is a gauge tapped into to measure that particular volume and mass of moving and pressurized air crammed into your intake, ready for your engine to accept. Let's look at an over-exaggerated example and diagram here. Imagine a man-sized pipe or tube, a gauge tapped to it, and enough volume of air passing through to push the needle to say 10 PSI. That crazy amount of pressurized volume of force is probably enough to feed a 100,000 horsepower power plant. I'm just saying. Also, let's look at another interesting factor here. Let's say a particular combination with a sought-after turbo kit or even a blower kit on there with a particular overdrive. Let's say it was already making 10 PSI, this particular setup. Now, you go ahead and swap out the heads on this setup. You've gone and swapped out the heads to a larger set. Larger meaning larger intake ports in CC and a larger combustion chamber, hence dropping the compression. Now, that particular swap will bleed off boost, will bleed off the PSI. You've actually added area now to the equation. So, if you were making 10 PSI previously, all sorted out, just by doing that swap, you've bled it off to probably making 8.5 to 9 PSI now. And that's just what adding area does to a setup that was already established. So the next time you see a group of guys getting together and competing on who's running more PSI to one another, when both setups they're talking about are a world of difference and a world apart. For example, it could be a 4-cylinder turbo at 35 PSI making 1,000 horsepower, let's say, compared to a big block twin turbo only making 15 PSI and he's making 1,500 horsepower. So you're better off showing them this video if that's the case. Thanks guys, thanks for tuning in.